Welcome to the Women's March Canada podcast, making the equality of women in Canada the new norm. This is episode 7 titled Tackling the Tough Topics. And boy, we've got an amazing guest to introduce you to today. My name is Melissa Durrell and I'm your host, inspiring, uniting, and leading the charge for the advancement of women across Canada. I give a warm welcome to Carla Ciccone. Carla, give us a wave.
Hi.
Yeah. Carla is a freelance writer, editor who's contributed articles to Glamour, The New Yorker, Elle Canada, and Chatelaine, just to name a few. She's a strong advocate for the equality and safety of women in Canada and around the world, which is amazing. And Chatelaine recently published her personal essay, What I Didn't Know About Having an Abortion, on the stigma and shame surrounding the procedure. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And there's so much to talk about. First, let's talk a little bit about the latest, which is really this article that you wrote. So many times many of the articles I've read from you, you're covering somebody else. How different is it to write such a personal piece?
It wasn't that different. I mean, I think enough time had passed that it was almost like I was writing about someone else. Like, you know, when something happens a few years ago and you revisit it, it's almost like you've grown so much since the incident that you have a different perspective. So it actually wasn't that difficult.
Good.
Yeah.
What kind of reaction have you had?
Overall, it's been really positive. I've gotten a lot of emails from women and men, and a lot of women who say things like, I wish I had read this before going in for my procedure, because it's oftentimes such a lonely, isolating experience. So overall positive. There's been a few negative emails, but we don't pay attention to those.
No. They're called trolls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So do you mind sharing a little bit about your story? We'll also put a link so you can read it as well, but talk a little bit about what happened.
So what happened was I went in to get the procedure done, and I had a weird experience from the start. The gynecologist who performed the surgery didn't look at me when I was on the table, and I just got this weird feeling like I should run out of the room as I was on the table, like ready to get pumped full of the drugs and go under and get the procedure. But Of course I didn't run out of the room. And then afterwards, in the weeks following, I just had terrible pain, terrible bleeding, and I just knew something was wrong. And so I went to the doctor, and this was in Calgary, Alberta. So I was there like on a work contract, so it was out of province, didn't have my family doctor there. I went to the doctor, and for some reason, she brought up the fact that she was Catholic and didn't believe in abortions when I told her that I had had one and was experiencing difficulties, which I thought was just like so bizarre. And it took me a lot of going back to her and other doctors and getting ultrasounds to eventually be told you had they called it a missed abortion. So you have to get it done all over again, basically. So back to the same clinic. Oh, and one piece that I missed was there was this little journal at the clinic on the waiting room table, which like in theory was a nice idea, like to have a place where women could share their thoughts and their stories. Like we're all experiencing this very strange and personal thing. And it was a nice idea to have. A lot of women wrote their fears and anxieties and hopes and everything. But it had been infiltrated by pro-life hate speech. So it was just, my entire experience, both times, was just very odd and really not what I expected, because, you know, usually you think people are picketing for abortion, they're outside the clinic. You don't expect that to face that when you're inside the waiting room, right? So anyway, it was a bad experience. And I also just found that it's not something that women are comfortable talking about. We're kind of taught to not talk about it, or to just very quickly get over it. And that bothers me because it's a medical procedure. It's a surgery. Many, many women, 1 in 3 have had them or will have them, or it just doesn't make sense that there's this much shame around speaking about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when we look at other countries, and I mean, especially it's easy because America is right beside us, and
Mm-hmm.
the problems that they're dealing with, it's really, I think, easy for us Canadian women to go, oh, well, we don't have issues here. But that's not
Exactly.
true at all. In fact, we need to
No.
open our eyes. And so what do you think we need to do? I mean, after you've been speaking with people, you wrote this amazing article, what do you think are some of the things that women who are watching us right now can glean from it?
I think if it opens up more conversations, that's great. I think we need to talk about it more. If we can get to the place where we're comfortable enough sharing our stories with each other, that's a good first step, I think. And not just talking about the medical side, but the mental health component too, because that's something that I found was just missing from the entire experience. And I know that in the States, like, they obviously have their own problems, but I know that Planned Parenthood, a component of their abortion service is mental health care,
Mm-hmm.
which we do not have here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real shame.
Yes,
So
that is something, that's a really good point, actually. If you're a doer and you're watching, that's something that we need to start to advocate more for, because
yeah.
1 in 3 women are going to go
Mm-hmm.
through this, and we need to make sure they're taken care of after, because it doesn't end when you walk out that door.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And I mean, because we're conditioned to just sort of like move on very quickly, and because, to be fair, many women just want to move on, and that's fine. That's their prerogative.
Yeah.
But would be nice to know that there's somebody there who you can talk to if you do have feelings that arise after the procedure.
Mhm.
So,
Did you read Misconceptions by Naomi Klein, I think it was?
no, I haven't read that.
Okay. It was really interesting. It was an interesting read, and she talks a lot about the idea around abortion, and
Mm-hmm.
and just being. I think for me, I read it after I had 2 kids, and this idea that before you have kids, you're like, yes, pro-choice, 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 and then
Yeah.
after you have kids, it sort of starts to mess with your head a little bit. But you still have to remember how important your
Yeah.
own is. What it comes down to, it's about every woman makes her own choice for her own body.
Yeah, it's a choice. And I mean, I think being pro-choice does not mean you're anti-children in any way. Like,
Not at all. Yeah.
I want to have children. I love children. I think that when women have children who want them, that's a beautiful thing. But, when women feel forced to have children, I don't think, I mean, that can lead, sometimes it works out, but sometimes, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that giving women the choice to do what they want with their bodies is what it comes down to. So,
Yeah, 100% agree.
and their lives.
You talked a little bit about religion in the
Yeah.
piece, and so I wondered if you dive into it a little bit more, because seems to be one of those, that's one of the factors that every
Yeah.
time you get into this. So yeah, your thoughts.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because, I mean,
You grew
in
up
terms of,
Catholic, did you not?
I grew up Catholic, and the Catholic religion has not changed very much in hundreds and hundreds of years. So they haven't kept up with science or medicine, and I think that the way they act does a disservice to women. I think that men have ruled that church, that religion, for a really long time, and that comes through in their attitude towards women, because, I mean, never mind the system in Canada and in North America, but in developing countries where women do not have access to safe, legal abortions, they're dying, and they're going through hell to just get an abortion, or to travel to a country where they can get one, and it's largely based on religion and based on the stigma that it's that you're going to go to hell, or that it's it's ridiculous. So I think religion has no place in medicine. And yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and you said you had a lot of people that were really positive about your article. I'm imagining that many of the people that weren't probably all had very similar Twitter bios.
Of like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Jesus is great, and I guarantee he would have been pro-choice. So
That's what I think too. So I'd love to move on to a couple, because you've had some really interesting journalism career. Did you always want to be a storyteller? Is that?
yeah, I think I did. I've always written stories, and writing was just like something that, as an introvert, something that I was drawn to and good at. So I found a way to sort of make a career of it, which has taken a while, but it's been worth it. So, yeah.
Well, your name truly comes up when we wanted to talk to you during the Me Too campaign, because you were one of the people who broke the Jiam Ghomeshi story.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that all happened.
Well, I broke the story before, like a year before.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I didn't break. I wrote about it about a year before women started coming forward publicly. So initially,
How did you hear about it? Because the big thing was always about all the whispers too, but you also had some personal involvement in it as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I met him, and his behavior towards me was, he touched me inappropriately and made me feel extremely uncomfortable and afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And like, really, you know, to the point where I couldn't shake it. Like, because, you know, as women, we deal with creeps on a day-to-day basis, but this was something about it was just not, it was next level. And the more I spoke with people in media in Toronto, where I was living at the time, the more I just got met with, oh yeah, like my friend, he did this to my friend, or I knew about that, or like literally everybody knew. It was an open secret. So I moved to New York, and I was writing for XO Jane, and I just couldn't shake it. And I decided, I mean, look, in hindsight, I think the way I wrote about it, I probably wouldn't do that again. Like, I kind of tried to make it sort of a joke, and it got edited poorly and given a title that I did not okay. So like a lot of factors contributed to like me feeling very uncomfortable after it was published. But I'm glad that I did it. Nobody really believed me at first, or a large, like the general population, because he was such a revered radio personality in Canada. I got, you know, a lot of backlash. You know, my mom called me crying because someone on morning television trash talked me, and like it was bad. It was like it was not fun. And, you know, it was before people were really openly talking about men in this way and talking about these experiences. So I just got ashamed.
So, I mean, and when I found out I was going to be interviewing you today, I thought, would it be like if that happened today?
Yeah.
Right? You would be embraced for your courage, for coming forward, for telling this story. And so, you know, and thank you for doing that at the beginning, but also too, like you never got that. You never got that community to rally around you that to thank you for that. And I feel like, so like we need to, you know, do it.
Yeah, no, it was very isolating. I felt very alone. I felt unwelcome in Canada, and like in Toronto especially. Mm-hmm. But I guess, and I actually don't know if, I don't know, because I feel like this is something that's happening predominantly in America right now. Yeah. So I don't know if the reaction in Canada would be much better than it was. Like, hopefully it would be, because it's like enough of a trend right now. But I think that Canadians, in general, the Canadian media likes to sort of gloss over these sorts of things and not dive into them. Like, I tweet Q about once a week because they joined in on the Me Too conversation. Yeah. But like, hey, why not talk about the abuser that you had hosting your show for 7 years? Why don't we address that? Why don't we have an open dialogue about that, Q? Like, why are we pretending to be this like supportive of women radio show now? Like, come on. Yeah. You owe us that. Yeah. Yeah. Next time I'm retweeting you when you do that. We should all you know. So we can get to have this conversation, because that's super important. I totally agree with you. And it's just disingenuous. Like, just don't say anything. But
Yeah.
if you're going to say something, maybe address the elephant in the room, because
Yeah.
that's what, whenever I see CBC tweeting or any news item talking about all the scandals that are going on in the States right now, it's the first thing I think of. Well, who are you to talk, CBC?
Yeah. But I will say this, I feel like here in Canada, they haven't let it go. So like when we hear
Right.
about the Matt Laurers or like the other, like it's just every day it's someone else, that it does come back, that,
Right.
and so I feel like it, but yeah, like I said at the
Maybe
beginning,
a part of the reason it comes back is because they haven't done anything
that's
to
right.
rectify the situation. They have swept it under the rug and tried to move on and replace the host of the show with another man who is lovely. He's a lovely host.
Yeah.
But they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
So it's still on people's minds, I guess.
So you do a lot of writing around women's issues around the world. What's your, I mean, obviously Me Too is a big deal right now, but what are you writing about? What's the thing that you really want to see change happen, where change should happen?
Well, I think it's great that we're getting to a place where women are comfortable sharing their stories. And it's not like a life breaker to share something personal or intimate and embarrassing, or like a story of abuse or anything that has happened. So I think I'm so glad that we're getting to that place where we don't have to feel shame around sharing stories, because I mean, as we saw with Me Too, it's almost everybody. It's everybody. Every woman has.
Every industry, every woman. I agree with you. Yeah.
So I think the more we're talking about it, that's what leads to change, and I'm excited for that, and I want to be a part of moving that forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work in a small agency, and there's 7 women that work with me, and they're all a lot younger than me. And I've actually said, like, I feel so like I'm so excited for them, because the work is really changing. And when I was your age, in a newsroom, but every, like, you didn't have, first of all, we didn't have female bosses, right?
No.
Like news, when I started in news 20 years ago, there weren't women who were running it, or the few that were definitely not in the small little spaces I was.
Right.
So that, I think, is a huge game changer, is that women are going into these leadership roles. And I think that is, first of all, that to me is one of the most important things we have to push forward. But also too, that, these millennials aren't putting up with it either. Like they're, like that, as a Gen Xer, it's sort of being that quiet and just taking it and putting my head down and working more. That's not acceptable. It's actually, I'm being shamed for accepting that, and I shouldn't. We need to
but it's not your fault, because that's how you were raised and conditioned to be, right? Like, it's not, and that's the same thing with, like, I don't blame women for not wanting to talk about these things if they're deeply uncomfortable with it, because I don't think we should force women to do anything they're not comfortable with. But I think it comes down to, like, talking about these things with women and with men from school years, probably, changing the way we talk to children and high schoolers and people in college. I mean, so often women who enter college, that all of a sudden you start learning about things that you're like, wait a minute, like everything I learned was a lie. and you have this, like, epiphany in college and become a feminist.
You're right. Yeah.
But then you enter the workforce and you're like, wait a minute, this is nothing I learned in college applies here, because it's like the old boys club. So I don't know. I think getting used to having conversations with everybody about these things is, like, that's how we see change happen.
And it's time for change.
It's time. Yes.
I was actually in New York, or Detroit, for the women's conference, and reclaiming our time was
amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I guess, how can people connect with you? Do you want to share your Twitter, your everything that so they can? Yeah,
I love Twitter. I mean, I loved it more. It's kind of, Twitter's an interesting world now, that Trump is the president. It's just like every time I sign in, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
It's depressing. But yes, I'm on Twitter, C. Ciccone.
And were you asked to be Time Person of the Year as well? You're just too busy, right?
Just too busy.
We'll let someone else do that.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. So give us your Twitter handle.
At C. Ciccone. So CCICCONE.
Right on. And so next time you tweet at Q, I'm retweeting you.
Thank you. Yeah. Come on, Q.
Yeah, right?
It's time.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being a bold and strong storyteller. And hey, you know what? Someone my daughter can look up to. She's 10, and that's what I want to see happen. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Carla Ciccone, and thanks to everyone that's tuned in to listen. Your comments are welcome and encouraged. Please subscribe to our Women's March Canada channel and receive updates every time we upload a new podcast, which is usually on Friday or Saturday of every week. Our mission across Canada is to stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, our safety, our health, and our families, recognizing that our vibrant and diverse communities are the strength of our country. This is the Women's March Canada podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Women's March CDA and on our website at womensmarchcanada.com. I'm Melissa Durrell. Have an amazing day. And we